Ravi was a simple man with a simple job. Every morning before the sun came up, he would walk to the big glass building where hundreds of people worked. The tall towers always looked grand and shiny, but inside them, Ravi's work was far from glamorous. He was the janitor, the man who swept the floors, cleaned the windows, and picked up what others left behind. While most people hurried to their desks in suits, Ravi quietly carried his mop and bucket, wearing the same faded blue uniform every day. His shoes were old but always clean. His hair had started to turn gray and his hands were rough from years of hard work. Yet there was something calm and steady about him. He didn't complain, didn't argue, and always greeted people with a small, warm smile, even when they didn't smile back. Most employees didn't even notice him. To them, he was invisible. They were busy typing away, making deals, and chasing success. But Ravi had his own way of finding peace in the noise. He liked watching people. He could tell who was kind by the way they said thank you, and who was proud by the way they ignored him. He believed that everyone had a story, even if they never told it. At lunch, while others ate in the cafeteria, Ravi would sit in the quiet corner near the window. He brought a small lunchbox from home, usually 2 chapatis and some vegetable curry. Sometimes he would save a bit of food to feed the stray cat that wandered near the gate. He didn't have much, but whatever he had, he shared. That was his nature. Ravi had once dreamed of becoming a music teacher. When he was younger, he used to play a small harmonium in his village. Music was his escape from all the noise of life. But poverty never allowed him to study or chase that dream. When his father fell sick, Ravi had to quit school and find work. One small job led to another until he ended up here, cleaning an office full of people who had the kind of life he once imagined. Still, Ravi was not bitter. He carried a quiet dignity in his work. He often told himself, even cleaning floors can shine someone's path. That thought made him smile. It gave him purpose. Every evening when the building grew silent and empty, Ravi found peace in the rhythm of his mop gliding across the floor. The sound of soft bristles brushing against marble was almost musical to him. Sometimes he would hum while he worked, old songs from his childhood full of warmth and memory. His humming would echo faintly in the empty hallways, mixing with the distant hum of city traffic. He lived alone in a small rented room on the edge of town. The place was barely enough for one person, but it was clean and full of little things he loved. On the wall, he had pinned a few old photographs of his parents and a picture of a small piano he once saw in a magazine. On a shelf sat a dusty old harmonium he had rescued from a junk shop years ago. Though it was broken, Ravi sometimes pressed its keys just to feel the sound vibrate under his fingers. It reminded him that even forgotten things could still make music. Ravi's life followed the same pattern every day: work, eat, sleep, repeat. But even in that routine he found beauty. He noticed the changing colors of the sky through the office windows. He smiled when he saw employees celebrating birthdays, even if no one offered him cake. He felt proud when the floors shone so bright that people's reflections appeared in them. To him, that shine was proof of his effort, proof that he mattered even if no one said so. People often underestimated Ravi. They saw only a poor janitor, not the man behind the uniform. But Ravi noticed everything. He had a sharp eye and a gentle heart. He knew when someone was having a bad day by the way they walked. He knew who stayed late every night chasing success. He saw loneliness, pride, stress, all the emotions people tried to hide. And yet he never judged anyone. There was something deeply peaceful about him. Maybe it was because he had already accepted life as it was. He didn't chase wealth or status. He believed kindness was the real richness a man could have. When a new employee once dropped her coffee cup and panicked, Ravi simply smiled, cleaned it up and told her softly, "Don't worry. Mistakes are lighter when we share them." His words stayed with her long after. One night, after everyone had gone home, Ravi stood near the big glass windows of the office. The city lights glittered like stars. He could see tall buildings, traffic below, and reflections of himself in the glass. A tired man with a kind face. For a moment, he wondered how different life might have been if he had followed his dream. But then he smiled. "Maybe," he whispered to himself, "my music is meant to be heard in other ways." He didn't know then that fate was listening, that the same music in his heart would soon change someone else's life. Someone far above his world, a little girl who hadn't spoken in years, That night, Ravi closed his mop cupboard, picked up his small bag, and left the office quietly, as he always did. But something in the air felt different, like the calm before a new beginning. The story that would soon make everyone speechless had just begun, and its first note had already been played by the janitor no one really saw. Anaya Mehra was unlike any other child who visited the big corporate office where her father worked. While other children ran around, laughed, and filled the hallways with chatter, Anaya moved like a quiet shadow, soft, gentle, and wordless. Her eyes were large and expressive, the kind that could speak even when her lips could not. She was 8 years old and she hadn't spoken a single word in almost 4 years. The staff at Mehra Industries knew her as the CEO's daughter. The little girl who never smiled, never laughed, and never said anything. She often came to the office after school, accompanied by her nanny, while her father, Mr. Arjun Mehra, buried himself in meetings and phone calls. Arjun Mehra was a man of power, tall, confident, and always in control. But when it came to his daughter, he felt helpless. Years ago, Anaya had been in a terrible car accident with her mother. Her mother didn't survive. Anaya did, but the trauma took her voice. The doctors said there was no physical damage to her throat. It was her mind that had shut down her speech. Therapy sessions, doctors, specialists, nothing worked. Every time someone tried to make her speak, she would lower her eyes and retreat into silence. Her father tried everything money could buy. Expensive treatments abroad, the best child psychologists, even spiritual healers. But no matter what he did, Anaya remained silent. And over time, her silence built a wall between them. Arjun loved his daughter deeply, but he didn't know how to reach her. His grief and guilt made him impatient. When he looked at her, he saw the face of his late wife, and the pain returned all over again. So he buried himself in work, convincing himself that success would somehow make up for the emptiness at home. Anaya, on the other hand, didn't need success or money. She needed warmth, someone to listen, not to question her silence. But in a world of loud voices and busy people, no one ever stopped long enough to hear her quiet heart. Most days, she sat in the corner of her father's glass-walled office, drawing in her sketchbook or playing softly with her dolls. The city stretched out behind her, tall buildings, moving cars, glittering lights, but she never looked at them. Her world was smaller, built of memories she couldn't express. One day, as her father rushed into a meeting, Anaya wandered out into the main hall. She followed a faint sound, a tune, soft and familiar, coming from the far end of the building. Her small footsteps led her to the lobby, where a grand piano stood near the glass window. No one ever played it. It was mostly there as decoration, a symbol of luxury. But that day, Anaya sat down on the bench, touched one key gently, and pressed it. A faint note echoed, delicate, uncertain, but alive. That was when Ravi noticed her. He had been sweeping near the entrance, quietly humming a tune, the same one his mother used to sing when he was little. When he looked up, he saw her, the CEO's daughter, sitting at the piano, her fingers trembling on the keys. She looked lost, but also curious, as if she wanted to say something through sound. Ravi didn't speak to her right away. He didn't want to scare her. Instead, he continued humming softly, pretending to clean nearby. His tune mixed with the piano's faint notes. For a brief moment, the sound of his humming and her playing came together, imperfectly but beautifully. Anaya looked up, surprised. No one had ever made music with her before. Their eyes met, hers curious, his kind and warm. He gave her a gentle nod, as if saying, "Go on, play." For a few minutes, the empty lobby filled with soft, uncertain music, one man's humming and one little girl's shy attempt to find a melody. When her nanny appeared and called her back, Anaya got up quietly and left. But before she walked away, she turned once more to look at Ravi. He smiled at her, a small, honest smile that said, "I heard you." That night, Ravi couldn't stop thinking about the little girl. He didn't know her name, but he saw something familiar in her silence. It reminded him of himself, of all the times he had swallowed his dreams and words because no one had listened. The next few days, Anaya returned to the piano every time she visited the office. She didn't play much, just pressed a few keys softly, but she always looked around first and to see if Ravi was there. And he always was. Sometimes he hummed, sometimes he just listened, pretending to dust the chairs nearby. It became their silent ritual. Neither spoke a word, but a strange friendship began to bloom. Between them, one built entirely on sound and silence. Other employees noticed but didn't say much. Some smiled, some whispered. "Look at that," they'd say. "The janitor and the CEO's daughter. What an odd pair." But to Anaya and Ravi, the world didn't matter. One evening, when the office was almost empty, Anaya did something unexpected. She pressed the keys harder this time, forming a tune. A shaky, uneven melody, but a melody nonetheless. Ravi stopped sweeping. His heart jumped. He recognized the notes. It was the same tune he used to hum. She had remembered it. For the first time in years, Anaya's eyes were alive. She didn't need to speak. Her music spoke for her, and Ravi understood every word of it. When she finished, she looked at him as if asking for approval. He nodded, his eyes misty, and whispered, "Beautiful." She couldn't hear the word, but she felt it, in his smile and the softness of his eyes. That night, as Anaya's car drove her home, she looked out the window and thought of the kind man with the mop who made music with her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. And Ravi, as he locked up the building, whispered to himself, maybe her silence is just waiting for the right song. He didn't know it yet. But that small connection, a janitor's tune and a child's piano note, would soon lead to something that would change both their lives forever. Anaya started coming to the office more often after that day. Something had changed, not in her voice but in her eyes. There was a spark, a small light that hadn't been there before. The grand piano in the lobby, which once stood untouched and silent, now became her corner of comfort. Every time her father had long meetings, Anaya would quietly slip away and sit at the piano. Ravi always knew when she had arrived. Even if he didn't see her, he could hear the soft tap of piano keys. Sometimes one note repeated again and again, sometimes two played together in a shy rhythm. He would smile to himself, put down his broom, and hum a gentle tune that matched her playing. Their wordless friendship grew day by day. It began with glances, her looking up from the piano to see if he was nearby and him giving a small nod of encouragement. Then it turned into unspoken understanding. He never pushed her to play or talk. He just made her feel seen. Ravi didn't know much about child psychology, but he understood pain. He knew what silence meant. Not because someone couldn't speak, but because the world had stopped listening. And that was something he'd felt too many times in his own life. Sometimes when Anaya made a mistake and hit the wrong note, she would stop suddenly, as if she'd done something wrong. Ravi would quietly tap his broom handle against the floor in rhythm, smiling. He would hum softly, continuing the tune, showing her that mistakes weren't bad, they were just part of music. Slowly, she started to play again, each note more confident than the last. As weeks passed, Ravi began bringing small things from home to share with her. A flower he found on his way to work, a tiny paper crane he folded from an old newspaper, and once a small harmonica. When he played it, Anaya's eyes widened with curiosity. She watched his fingers move, the way the little instrument sang with his breath.
He handed it to her once, and she blew into it gently.
The sound that came out was soft, uncertain, but she smiled. A real smile, small but bright. That smile stayed with Ravi all day. Meanwhile, Mr. Mehra had no idea this quiet bond was forming. For him, the office was a battlefield of numbers and deals. He barely noticed when Anaya disappeared for a while during his meetings, as long as she stayed safe. The nanny would sometimes mention that the girl liked sitting by the piano, and he would just nod absent-mindedly. But Anaya's world was slowly coming alive. One afternoon, a light rain tapped against the tall glass windows. The office was quieter than usual. Most employees had left early. Anaya sat at the piano, pressing the keys slowly, while Ravi swept near the door. The sound of rain mixed with her notes, creating something magical. Without thinking, Ravi began to hum. Not too loud, just enough for her to hear. It was an old village lullaby, the kind his mother used to sing when the rain fell on their tin roof. The tune was simple but full of warmth. Anaya paused and listened. Then she began to press the piano keys in rhythm with his humming, copying the rise and fall of the melody. For the first time they were playing together. Ravi didn't stop humming until the song ended. When it did, he looked up and saw her watching him, her eyes bright, cheeks slightly red, as if she had found a piece of her lost voice inside that tune. He smiled and said softly, "Music can talk even when words can't." She didn't reply, but she nodded, a small, sure nod that said she understood. After that day, she tried more sounds. Sometimes she would tap the table with her fingers. Other times she would play little tunes that sounded like questions. Ravi would answer with humming or a few notes on his harmonica. It was their language, made of sound, silence, and feeling. Every time she played, she seemed lighter. She began to draw more in her sketchbook, drawings of the piano, of musical notes, and once a picture of a man sweeping near her while she played. When Ravi saw it, he laughed softly, a tear glinting in his eye. "She drew me," he whispered to himself. "She really sees me." For someone who had spent years feeling invisible, that drawing meant more than any words ever could. One evening, while he was cleaning near the CEO's office, Ravi overheard two employees talking. They said the little girl hadn't spoken since her mother died, that she hadn't laughed or sung or said a word. Ravi stopped sweeping. He looked toward the lobby where she was sitting quietly by the piano, her small hands tracing the keys. His heart ached. He wanted to help her, not out of pity, but because he felt she deserved to be free from that silence. He didn't know how yet, but a small idea began to form in his mind. He thought about how music had always helped him through loneliness, how sound could reach where words could not. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her speak again, not with her voice, but with something deeper. That night, as he locked the office, he walked past the piano. His reflection shimmered on its black surface. He touched one of the keys gently. It made a faint note, soft like a whisper. Ravi smiled and whispered to the empty room, "One day, little one, you'll sing. I don't know how, but you will." Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights reflected off puddles on the street, shining like 1,000 tiny stars. And somewhere inside that tall building, two unlikely souls, a poor janitor and a mute girl, had unknowingly begun composing the song that would soon leave everyone speechless. The next few weeks passed quietly, yet something beautiful was growing between Ravi and Anaya, something even they couldn't quite explain. Every day after her father's meetings began, Anaya would wander to the piano, her small feet making no sound on the marble floor. Ravi would always be nearby, pretending to sweep, but really he was listening. He never wanted to disturb her, only to let her feel free. Free to play, free to feel, free to be herself. But one afternoon changed everything. It was a Friday. The office buzzed with noise, phones ringing, footsteps rushing, and paper shuffling. Mr. Mehra had a big meeting that day with investors, so the entire building felt tense. Anaya sat quietly at her usual spot near the piano, holding her sketchbook. She looked anxious, like the loudness of the world was pressing on her silence. Ravi noticed. He could always tell when her shoulders slumped or her eyes lost their sparkle. He finished mopping the floor and gently walked over, keeping a respectful distance. Then he said softly, "Do you want to play a little today?" Anaya hesitated but slowly nodded. She climbed onto the piano bench and placed her tiny fingers on the keys. The first few notes were shaky, unsure. But then Ravi began humming along just like before, the same slow, soothing tune that always calmed her. Little by little, she relaxed. The tension in her face melted away, replaced by quiet focus. What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, Mr. Mehra was walking past the lobby with two important guests. When he heard the sound of music, he stopped. His daughter, his mute daughter, Yin, was playing. The investors smiled, whispering, "Your daughter plays beautifully." Mr. Mehra froze. His heart thudded. He hadn't heard music in his home for years, not since his wife passed away. The sound of Anaya's piano touched something deep inside him. But when his eyes fell on the janitor standing nearby, humming softly as she played, his expression hardened. After the guests left, he called Ravi into his office. His voice was sharp, his eyes cold. "What were you doing near my daughter?" he demanded. Ravi stood nervously, holding his cap in both hands. "Sir, she was just playing the piano. I was only helping her find the tune." "Helping her?" Mr. Mehra snapped. "You're a janitor, not a music teacher. You have no right to be near her. Do your job and stay in your place." The words cut deep, but Ravi didn't respond. He simply nodded and said softly, "Yes, sir." That night, as he cleaned the empty office, his mind replayed the moment over and over. He hadn't meant any harm, He just wanted the little girl to smile, to feel something again. He looked at the piano shining under the dim lights and felt a lump in his throat. He could stop now. He could stay away and do what the CEO said, but when he thought about Anaya's eyes, the way they lit up when she played, he knew he couldn't walk away. He couldn't abandon the small spark of hope she had found. So the next day he made a decision. A bold one. He made a decision. A bold one. After finishing his work, Ravi went straight to the CEO's office. The receptionist stared in surprise. No janitor had ever dared to do that before, but Ravi's face was calm, almost peaceful. He knocked on the door. Mr. Mehra looked up, frowning. "What is it now?" Ravi took a deep breath. "Sir, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice steady but respectful. Mr. Mehra sighed impatiently. "Make it quick." "I want permission," Ravi said, "to teach your daughter to sing." The CEO stared at him in disbelief. "To sing?" he repeated, almost laughing. "Are you out of your mind? She can't even speak." "I know," Ravi replied gently, "but she can feel music. She understands it. Maybe she doesn't need to speak first. Maybe she just needs to listen to herself." Mr. Mehra leaned back, shaking his head. "This is absurd. You're a janitor. What makes you think you can help her when doctors couldn't?" Ravi hesitated, then said quietly, "Because, sir, I listen, and sometimes that's all someone needs." There was silence in the room. Mr. Mehra looked at him for a long time, his face unreadable. Something in Ravi's tone, his sincerity, his courage, made him pause. Finally, he said in a low voice, "You're serious about this?" "Yes, sir," Ravi said. "If you allow me, I'll come after work. No charge, no trouble. Just give me one chance." The CEO stared out the window, deep in thought. He didn't believe in miracles anymore, but something in the janitor's calm confidence made him curious. What if this man saw something everyone else had missed? After a long silence, he said slowly, "1 week. If I see even a small difference, you can continue." Ravi's eyes brightened. He nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir. I promise you won't regret it." When Ravi left the office, his heart raced, not from fear, but from hope. He wasn't sure how he would do it, but he believed that music could heal what words could not. That evening, when Anaya arrived, Ravi approached her as usual, but this time, his eyes held quiet excitement. He placed his hand gently over his heart, then pointed to the piano, then to her. She looked confused at first, then smiled shyly. He sat on a nearby chair and began humming a simple tune, tapping softly on the floor in rhythm. She followed, pressing the keys to match his hums. The sound that filled the lobby was delicate, hesitant but pure. For the first time, she wasn't just playing random notes. She was following a pattern, creating something beautiful and real. Ravi watched her and thought, "This is it. This is how she'll learn to sing, and through her heart, not her voice." He didn't know that this small moment, this quiet act of faith, was about to start something extraordinary, something that would soon leave the whole company, and her father completely speechless. The next week felt different, brighter, quieter, and yet more alive than ever before. Ravi now had permission to work with Anaya after hours, and for the first time in his life. He wasn't just cleaning floors, and he was creating something beautiful. Every evening, after everyone had left, the big glass office turned into a music room. The lights outside dimmed, the city sparkled beyond the windows, and the two of them, the janitor and the mute child, sat by the piano. Ravi would bring his old notebook, filled with rough sketches of songs he had once dreamed of writing. He would hum softly, showing her the rise and fall of a melody. Anaya would watch carefully, her fingers tracing invisible notes in the air before touching the piano keys. Sometimes she made mistakes, sometimes she got shy and stopped halfway, but Ravi never scolded her. Instead, he smiled and said gently, "Even silence is part of music. Don't be afraid of it." Anaya's eyes would sparkle at his words. She had never met anyone who made her feel that her silence was something beautiful, not broken. Ravi's plan wasn't just to teach her to play songs. His plan was much deeper. He wanted to teach her how to sing through feeling, to express emotions through sound, to let her heart speak even when her voice couldn't. So he began simple. Every day he would ask her to play what she felt, not what she thought sounded nice, but what her heart wanted to say. One evening when she seemed sad, her tune was slow and soft, like raindrops falling on glass. Another day when she was happy, her fingers danced fast over the keys, filling the room with light and laughter. Ravi would hum along, writing down the notes after each session. He was slowly building something, a melody that wasn't his or hers but theirs. He called it the voice of silence. Outside those late hours, the world had no idea what was happening inside the empty lobby. The guards sometimes heard faint music drifting through the halls, but they never guessed it came from the CEO's daughter and the janitor. One night, as they were finishing, Ravi brought something from his bag, a small recording device. It was old, second-hand with scratches on the side. He smiled and said, "I want you to hear what you sound like." He pressed the record button and Anaya started playing, a soft, trembling melody that began with slow notes and then rose gently like a whisper, turning into a voice. Ravi hummed behind her, guiding the rhythm, filling the spaces she left. When they finished, he played it back. Anaya's eyes widened. She covered her mouth, shocked. She had never heard her music before. For the first time, she could hear herself. She pointed to the recorder, then to her chest, one as if asking, "Oh, that's me?" Ravi nodded with a warm smile. "Yes, that's you. That's your voice." Tears shimmered in her eyes. She didn't cry out loud, but Ravi saw everything in that one look. Surprise, joy, disbelief, and something new. Pride. He knew he was right. She didn't need words to speak. She already had a voice. It was hidden inside her music. Over the next few days, they kept recording. Ravi would arrange the small tunes she played and add simple humming, sometimes tapping a rhythm with his hands or using an empty bucket as a drum. He even borrowed an old guitar from a security guard who used to play on weekends. Little by little, the simple notes turned into a real song. It was like watching a flower bloom, soft, patient, and full of grace. Anaya began bringing her own ideas too. She would draw shapes on her notepad, a wave for a soft sound, a sun for a bright one, a storm cloud for a strong beat. Ravi understood every picture. Their bond had grown beyond language. Sometimes when she got tired, she would rest her head on the piano and listen to Ravi hum. He would lower his voice and whisper, "One day we'll let everyone hear your song, and when they do, they'll understand you, not through words, but through your heart." What Ravi didn't know was that someone else had started noticing their late-night sessions. Mr. Mera's assistant had seen the janitor and the little girl sitting together after hours. He didn't say anything at first, but curiosity made him mention it to the CEO one morning. "Sir, I thought you should know. The janitor and your daughter are still spending time together. She plays the piano and he records it." Mr. Mera frowned. "Records it? What for?" The assistant shrugged. "I'm not sure, sir, but she seems happy." That last word stayed in Mr. Mera's mind all day. Happy. He hadn't seen his daughter happy in years. That night he stayed late on purpose, hiding behind the glass partition of his office. Watching from a distance, what he saw took his breath away. His daughter sat at the piano, completely focused, her face glowing softly in the light. Ravi sat beside her, tapping rhythm, humming quietly. There was no pressure, no therapy, just two souls creating music together. For the first time, Mr. Mera saw his daughter smiling, not politely, not shyly, but a real, radiant smile. He stood there, speechless. That night he didn't interrupt, he just listened. As the final note faded, Ravi looked at Anaya and whispered, "Beautiful. That's your song now." She nodded, touching her heart. Mr. Mera turned away slowly, something heavy in his chest. He realized that the janitor, the man he had scolded, was giving his daughter something that no doctor, no money, and no therapist ever could: hope. Ravi's secret plan was never about teaching her to sing. It was about helping her find her voice, the one hidden deep inside her silence, and soon, that voice, that song, would echo far beyond those office walls and leave everyone speechless. The lights dimmed, and silence filled the room. Only the soft glow from the stage lights touched Anaya's face as she sat before the grand piano. The entire hall, packed with employees, guests, and Mr. Mera himself, waited quietly. They had heard that the CEO's daughter, who had never spoken a word since childhood, was about to perform something special. No one knew what to expect. Ravi stood to the side, his old uniform freshly ironed, his hands nervously gripping the little recording device he'd used during all their sessions. His heart beat fast, not with fear but with hope. This was the moment he had been working toward, the moment Anaya would show the world what her silence truly meant. When her small fingers touched the piano keys, a hush fell over the crowd. The first note floated through the air, soft and trembling, like a whisper testing its strength. Then another followed, then another, each one clearer, stronger, more confident. The melody built slowly, rising and falling like waves against the shore. It was hauntingly beautiful, sad and full of light at the same time. It didn't sound like a song someone had written. It sounded like a feeling, something pure and human, flowing straight from her heart. Mr. Mara sat in the front row, his eyes fixed on his daughter. He couldn't breathe. Every note pulled at him, each one telling a story he hadn't heard in years. He could feel her pain, her loneliness, her memories. But then as the music changed, he heard something else: hope, forgiveness, love. Halfway through, Ravi quietly walked to the sound system and pressed play on his recorder. Suddenly, a soft heartbeat rhythm filled the room. People looked around, confused. The beat was real, steady and human: thump, thump, thump. And then they understood. Ravi had recorded the sound of Anaya's heartbeat and blended it with the melody. Each piano note moved in time with it, her heart and her music becoming one. She wasn't just playing a tune. She was speaking through her heartbeats, turning her silence into a living song. Gasps filled the hall. Some people covered their mouths in shock. Others wiped their tears quietly. Ravi stood beside the piano now, his voice trembling as he spoke softly to the crowd. This is not just music. These are the sounds of a little girl who could not speak but never stopped feeling. Every beat you hear is her heart. Every note is her voice. You don't need words to speak the truth. Sometimes, love can find its own language. Anaya kept playing, her face glowing under the lights, her fingers moving with emotion so deep it made everyone forget she was mute. It was as if the piano itself had found her voice and was speaking for her. Mr. Mara couldn't hold it any longer. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He remembered the little girl who used to sing to her mother, who loved lullabies, who laughed at the sound of music, and then one day went completely silent. He realized that the man he had once called just a janitor had done something no one else could. He had helped his daughter speak again, without saying a word. When the last note faded, the entire room went still. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, people began to clap, softly at first, then louder, until the hall thundered with applause. Anaya stood up and looked at Ravi. Her eyes were full of tears, but she was smiling, a bright, full smile that reached all the way to her heart. Ravi's eyes shone too. He bent down and whispered, "You did it, little one. You sang." Mr. Mara walked slowly toward the stage, his face wet with tears. For a second, he just stood there, staring at his daughter. Then he knelt beside her and hugged her tightly, something he hadn't done in years. The audience went silent again, watching the powerful moment between father and child. "I heard you," he whispered against her hair. "I finally heard you, my angel." Anaya closed her eyes and hugged him back, her small hands gripping his suit tightly. Ravi turned away slightly, trying to hide the emotion on his face. He had promised himself he wouldn't cry, but it was impossible not to. This was the moment he had dreamed of. Not fame, not money, not recognition, just this. A father hearing his daughter's voice through love. Not words. When the applause began again, louder this time, Mr. Mara stood up and faced the audience. "This man," he said, pointing to Ravi, "has done what no doctor or therapist could do. He gave my daughter her voice back. Not through science, but through kindness." Everyone in the hall rose to their feet. The applause turned into cheers. Ravi stood frozen, overwhelmed. He wasn't used to attention. He simply bowed his head humbly. "I didn't do much, sir," he said softly. "She already had the music in her. I just helped her find it." That night, when everyone left, the hall was quiet again. The stage was empty, the lights dimmed. Ravi stood by the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys. He smiled to himself. "You sang tonight, little one," he whispered. And the world listened. He turned off the lights, picked up his old mop from the corner, and walked out into the night. The stars glittered above the city like tiny notes in a song. Behind him, the piano stood still, but it wasn't silent anymore. It had found its voice, and so had she. The next morning, when Ravi came to work, something felt different in the air. People who used to walk past him without a glance now smiled and nodded. Some stopped to shake his hand, others whispered, "You're the man who helped the CEO's daughter." The whole building buzzed with the story of what had happened the previous evening, the performance that had left everyone speechless. But Ravi didn't care about the attention. All he cared about was the little girl who had found her voice. When he reached the lobby, Anaya was already there, sitting on the same piano bench, her small legs swinging, a big smile lighting up her face. She looked different, lighter, freer. Her eyes no longer carried the sadness that used to weigh them down. When she saw Ravi, she jumped up and ran toward him. Without a word, she hugged him tightly. Ravi froze for a second, then knelt down, gently patting her back. He felt her warmth, her heartbeat. No sound came from her mouth, but she didn't need to speak. Her hug said everything. "Thank you, you changed my world." A moment later, Mr. Mehra appeared from behind them. He looked nothing like the stern man Ravi had met before. His eyes were softer, his expression calm. He walked up and placed a hand on Ravi's shoulder. "Ravi," he said quietly, "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Ravi quickly shook his head. "No, sir. You owe me nothing. I just did what any human should do and listen." Mr. Mehra smiled sadly. "No, Ravi, you did much more. You gave me back my daughter." He looked at Anaya, who was now touching the piano keys softly, her small fingers tracing the same melody she had played the night before. "For years I tried everything to make her speak. But you made me realize, and she didn't need words. She just needed to be heard." Ravi's eyes grew misty. He didn't know what to say. "Come with me," Mr. Mehra said suddenly. They walked upstairs to the CEO's office, the same room where Ravi had once been scolded and humiliated. Now the same man who had shouted at him offered him tea and a seat. Mr. Mehra opened a folder on his desk. "I thought all night about how to thank you. Money doesn't feel right. What you did can't be bought. But you once mentioned you used to love music, didn't you?" Ravi looked surprised. "Yes, sir, I did." "Long ago," Mr. Mehra smiled. "Then let's bring it back. I've decided to help you open a small music school. A place for children like Anaya. Children who can't speak or hear, but who still have music in their hearts." Ravi's mouth fell open. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Mehra said warmly, "because the world needs more people like you, people who can turn silence into a song." Tears filled Ravi's eyes. He had never dreamed of something like this. For years he had cleaned floors in empty rooms. He had been invisible, but now his heart was full, not with pride, but with purpose. A few months later, a small building opened near the edge of the city. The sign outside read, "The Voice of Silence, a music school for special children." Founded by Ravi Kumar and supported by Mehra Foundation, inside, the rooms were painted with bright colors. Instruments hung on the walls, small drums, pianos, guitars, flutes. Children of all kinds came there, some who couldn't hear, some who couldn't speak, some who were simply afraid to be themselves. And Ravi welcomed them all with his warm smile. Every day he told them, "You don't need a voice to sing. You just need a heart that listens." Anaya was the school's first student. She played the piano every morning before classes began, her music filling the little hall. The other children watched her with wide eyes, amazed by how she made feelings come alive through sound. She became a symbol of hope, the girl who couldn't speak, but who spoke louder than anyone else in the world. Mr. Mehra visited often, always bringing new instruments, sometimes just sitting quietly and listening. He was no longer the man trapped in his grief. He had become gentle again, a father reborn through his daughter's song. And Ravi? He was no longer just a janitor. He still wore simple clothes, still lived humbly, but now people called him Sir. Children hugged him, parents thanked him, and strangers smiled when they saw him. But he never forgot where he came from. He still swept the floors of his school every evening, humming softly as he did. When someone once asked him why he still cleaned when he could hire others, he smiled and said, "Because every clean floor shines like a reflection of someone's dream." I never want to forget that. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the little school, Anaya played her favorite melody, the same song she had performed that night months ago. Ravi stood near the door, listening, his eyes half closed. The golden light touched her face, and for a moment, everything felt still, like time had paused to listen too. When she finished, she turned to him and did something she had never done before. She whispered very softly, "Thank you." Ravi froze. The sound was faint, fragile, but it was real. He felt tears rush to his eyes. He slowly knelt beside her, his voice trembling. "Say it again." Anaya smiled and whispered it once more. "Thank you." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't loud, but it was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. He hugged her gently, his eyes wet, his heart overflowing. "No, little one," he said softly. "Thank you. You taught me that even silence can sing." Outside, the evening breeze carried the faint sound of piano notes into the open sky. The city lights flickered in the distance and the stars began to appear, each one shining like a small promise of hope. Ravi looked up and smiled. The world had finally learned to listen, and the janitor who once swept away dust was now sweeping away silence, one melody at a time. Dust was now sweeping away silence, one melody at a time.